Hello, and welcome to the From Grief to Purpose podcast. I am the host, Nina, and today I have a very special guest on the podcast that will be joining me here shortly. Let me introduce you all, pre-introduce you to her first of all. So she has a radiant personality. So from her radiant smile and even brighter personality, Pastor Shaniqua Karanja brings light to those overshadowed by grief, anxiety, and life's challenges. She's armed with a bachelor's degree in Christian counseling, and she fully immerses herself in ministry, coaching, and counseling. Shaniqua is a licensed pastoral and temperament counselor, a professional life coach, and ordained minister, and a children's book author. She holds certifications in emotional intelligence, anxiety, fear, grief, therapeutic arts, and prepares enriched marriage mentoring counseling. Her mission to help those struggle develop stronger relationships. Her mission is to help those who are struggling develop stronger relationships, healthier marriages, and overall just wholeness. She uniquely combines coaching and pastoral counseling to guide clients in deepening their relationship with God and achieving their goals. Additionally, Shaniqua is a certified etiquette coach and enjoys teaching etiquette to both youth and adults in her spare time. Let's go ahead and bring in my very special guest, Pastor Shaniqua Karanja. Hi.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Listen, thank you for coming on. Thank you so much again for coming on. We've already, of course, met. I've had the pleasure of meeting you and just talking to you about what we're going to talk about today, which is grief styles. And I didn't myself know, I knew what grief styles was, but I didn't know how detailed it was. I was on the basic, I guess you can say, of, the 5 stages and trying to equate 5 stages into grief styles. So when you broke it down to me, I was like, okay, this is not something I've even learned yet from my own personal training. So we're going to get into that. But if you if there's any other information that I've missed out on, if you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself, Pastor Shaniqua, please, by all means, go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, you said it all, really. But I did want to share some of my experiences with grief. Grief is a very passionate topic for me personally. I believe that I was called specifically towards grief, and I spend a lot of time with a nonprofit called Grief Compassion Network. We work with grieving families and individuals. It is personal to me because my family and I have experienced loss of our own. We lost a daughter in between our 2 boys, and it really was the catalyst for going back to school and starting a journey to counseling and coaching. So I'm happy to be here to just kind of dive a little deeper into grief styles with you today.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for joining me. And then also thank you to those who are listening or will listen. Let me also reintroduce myself just a little bit. So I am a grief and empowerment coach. And so my goal with this show and episode and future episodes is to always just bring light to grieving and how we grieve and understanding grief and being that supportive podcast just for others to be able to tune in, learn, educate, and introduce other coaches, therapists, and people with just everyday experiences in effort to help someone else. So we hope that this episode blesses you all today and that you can gain something from it to add to your own personal journey. So I have my questions prepared for you, ma'am. And of course, I need you to teach us about, just grief style. So I think I just want to start off with the first question. My first question I have for you. So if you see me looking down, audience, I'm looking down at my notes. And then, we can just go from there. So in reference to, grief and grief styles, what does it mean when we say every person has their own grief style? Or should we even, let's give a definition. If you can give a definition for someone that may not even know what a grief style is, and there may be needing more, articulation around that. What is a grief style?
Right. So just to keep it as simple as possible, grief style is basically the way that a person inherently grieves. In the beginning, when we're younger, we're taught to grieve based on the people who are raising us, the people that we spend the most time with. We learn their grief style, the way they grieve. But as we grow and we start to embark on life ourselves and experience grief of our own, situations that have brought loss into our lives, our own style, the way that we do it, the way that we process and walk out grief and loss develops for itself. That's what grief style is. It's unique to the person, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That makes total sense. And I remember as we were speaking on this before, I even thought of like as we transition from, our upbringing, and then also to couple it along with like, as we're becoming our own, what we learn too from like, I don't know, work, or just even, holding on to that style, or can someone still hold? Let me just ask you that, like, can someone not transition into their own and still just hold on to how they were raised to grieve, or do they, still kind of, I don't want to say morph, transition into their own grieving style, taking?
I feel like with the way grief works, it's similar to any other life change, if you will. Mm-hmm. We are who we are, with our guardians or our parents up to a certain point. Then we start maybe college or career or military. And in that space where we are finding out who we really are, that's when the way that we live, the style of how we live even starts to become, if you will. And so, yes, in some ways, a person for a while will continue to grieve like what they learned. But as they progress in life and things start happening, it'll start to become their own. It won't always look like what they knew, because as they're changing and learning themselves, the way that they process any emotion, not just grief, changes to fit them. Some people struggle. Some people, they struggle with managing and processing emotions because they don't have safe places to do that and discover what that looks like for them. But eventually, everyone gets to a place where in emotions of any kind, grief, joy, any of it, it starts to look like what it will for them.
Nice. All right. So with, I don't want to go too deep into this. Actually, let's go into the second part of the question. How do you help clients with your expertise and in your field? How do you help your clients identify their unique way of grieving, after understanding, what you just said and how grief transitions from, your upbringing to your own personal grief style? How do you help your clients navigate that?
Well, I start by trying to teach them what we call temperament. Okay. There are 5 temperament types in traditional psychology. 4 of them are identified and recognized. In Christian psychology, there are 5. I teach the clients first that temperament is inherent. It is how they are hardwired. It's what was designed for them before the world ever touched them. That's how I say it. And then there's character. Character is environment driven. It's how it's, what we've been taught. It's what we've seen. It's our life experiences, the people who are speaking into us, our friends, our coworkers. That's where character comes in. And then there's personality. Personality, a lot of times people put a lot of stock in the personality, but the truth is personality can change with the wind, is what I say. When it depends on what the situation is, who the people are, and a person's going to look a specific way. So I help the client first identify those 3 separate parts of themselves. And then we focus in on temperament, that inherent God-wired part of who they are. That is actually the thing that's going to determine how they walk out most of their emotions. And when they learn what that is, it helps them to feel more comfortable and confident in the fact that, hey, I may not grieve the way Menina grieves. I may not grieve the way Shaniqua grieves. The way that I process is the way I process, and then that's okay. So that's how I begin the process of teaching them, is by first identifying the 3 separate areas, which is the building blocks of humanity, which is temperament, character, and personality, and then helping them to understand their temperament and what that looks like up against their life.
Nice. Okay. So again, identifying those 3: temperament, character, and personality. And that's just the start, right? Because there's so much more to unpack after that. It's going to get into, and as I'll mention, I had the opportunity, and the reason why I said there's so much more to unpack, to do an assessment with Pastor Shaniqua. So there is so much more to unpack after, these first 3, I'll call them stepping stones, if you will, at first. And so before we move into move on to the next question, I want to go back just a bit and just say, like, when we're grieving something, that doesn't just mean that you can grieve the loss of someone, right? As far as a death, is that correct? There's many grief.
Right. There's so many layers and ways that a person can be, or what they may be grieving. It could be the death of someone. It could be the loss of a job, the loss of a friendship. It could be even a move. I work with a lot of senior citizens, and the transition from their home that they lived in for such a long time to maybe a nursing community, that is something that can result in grief as well. And so it's not just the death of someone, it is so many things. Grief can show itself in any major transition in a person's life, basically.
Yes, because it is a major transition, like you're saying. It's a transitional, process in life that you're going through. And then if you don't know how to go through that process, it can be very difficult to navigate it, especially if you're doing it by yourself. That's, I always suggest, and this is the importance of the podcast too. I have so many coaches and therapists on here. Yes, I have my family on here. Yes, I have my friends, but those are more like, one-on-one personal conversations that we have, that we can glean from our own personal experiences, and if it helps someone. But it's very important to have that coach or that therapist in your corner, or even that special that friend that has wisdom, and you can trust that person with guiding you through your process. Like, I was watching TED Talk, and this a woman was on there. Matter of fact, let me just reference her name because I don't want to misquote her. She's a speaker. Her name was Tanya Billin. I'm sorry, y'all. Her name is Miss Teppers. Okay. And I'll get the full name later. But anywho, she had mentioned that she had a friend. She had gone through her loss herself. And she mentioned she had a friend that had went through a loss. They both lost their spouses at a very young age. I want to say they were in their 30s. And the advice that they were getting from their family and friends were things like, well, just move on. You should be done by now. Grieving. You should even start dating somebody else. And the friend had mentioned that it had only been 2 weeks after her husband had passed away, and her family was telling her to get over it. And so even to the point where she had left the friend on a holiday to go visit her family, and her mother had told her not to come into this house with all that sadness. And so yeah, and I was like, it's very important to me. I'm very sensitive around like how you approach people too. I think that's like some other highlights I want to bring out during this particular podcast, is understanding grief styles, because I think it's important to just, if you've never lost anyone or just faced that significant loss like that of losing someone in this context in which I'm speaking, it's important to understand, or at least, be able to sympathize with someone, to kind of get the language so that not to say the wrong things to people. What would be some of your suggestions to, in understanding fully grief, styles and the temperament, somebody's character and personality, how should a friend or family member approach someone, or what's some tips that we can give them before we get into too deep into the weeds here?
Yeah. It's so funny. I often say that we need to have like a grief 101 class. Truth is, we teach and learn just about everything else. As we're getting older, we learn about finances, we learn about relationships, but for whatever reason, we do not. Grief is that taboo topic that nobody wants to really delve into. And I think it's because they're afraid of all of the emotions that come with it. But what I would say to people who are supporting a person who is going through a loss of any kind is sometimes it's better to be silent. That's just, I know it could be hard to not really have something to say, but sometimes what matters most is that a person is present, that you're there with the person that's going through something. You don't have to have the right words. In fact, there are no right words, but there are a lot of wrong ones, so saying things like get over it, or even something as cliche as God has a plan. We hear that a lot too. Those things can be very damaging in the moment. And so it's better to not try to fill the space with words and sometimes just be present. And you could be honest and say, you know what? I don't know what the right thing to say here is. And so for that reason, I'm just going to be here. I'm just going to sit with you. I'm going to help you with whatever you need. But don't take my silence for a lack of care. I'm being silent because I care so much that I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Yes. Okay. So in transitioning to my next question for you that I have for you, can you share some examples of different grief styles you've encountered in your counseling work, including how do you get from the assessment, the intake, let me say it like that, of the client, and then moving them to these, assessing their temperament, the character, and the personality. After that, like how are we breaking that down for someone that comes to a client that comes to see you?
So usually when they come to see me, they are, by the time a person comes to see me, really, they're not just dealing with the loss, they're also dealing with how they're being received by others. They're dealing with the fact that, either people are either not checking in on them or they're with them, but saying the wrong things. And so that's normally what brings them. They get to the place where this is so overwhelming, I need to talk about it with someone. So during that intake process, I let them know, hey, we can actually help you to identify your inherent wiring, which will help you feel more comfortable with how you're walking this out. Because the whole point of it is not really to just try to get people off their back, but it's about the person who's experiencing the loss getting the opportunity to feel comfortable with how they are walking it out. Because most likely, by the time they're coming to me, people are telling them that they're doing it wrong. You're in your house too much. You're not coming out with everybody else, or you're quiet now. Or like you said, the person with the podcast, they say, don't come in here with all that sadness. They're being told basically, you're not doing it right. And so I'm not going to tell a person that they're doing it right or wrong. What I'm going to do is help them to understand that we have a tool called temperament analysis that we use to help them to understand the why behind everything that they do. The why is not just for how you grieve, it's how you process any and all things. And so they take an 18-question questionnaire that takes about 5 minutes to take. And believe it or not, that 5 minutes and those 18 questions tell me so much about the person. And from that, honestly, I can't say it any other way. I pray, I ask the Lord to help me to properly explain to them in ways that they can understand what their wiring looks like. And I'll take their situation, whatever loss they're working through, and I help them to understand why they may be, pulling themselves away from others, or why they're trying to be super busy. And people are like, oh, you're too busy, you need to slow down. Some people, because of the way they're wired, that's how they actually grieve. They grieve by getting it done, let's go out here. Let's make sure we're getting this done, that done, that done. Doesn't mean that they're ignoring what's going on. It means that that's just the way that they are processing their loss.
Mm-hmm. Yes, like as you mentioned, the helping someone identify how they're inherently wired, basically means like, this is just how I am. You cannot help it, or it's, you've adapted this, you've grown up like this, and it's a pattern that's stuck to you, some areas. So in the assessment that I was speaking of, well, this is exactly what I was talking about, where I was able to, before I took it, of course, Pastor Shaniqua, said, just, you answer, just as with the quickest response, that my natural response, like, don't think about the question correct, like, just go ahead and answer. And I did that. It did not take long at all. It's very quick question assessment. But the depth of like what you were able to pull from the assessment, I'm gonna be honest, I was not expecting like that, amount of like in-depthness. I thought we were just gonna go over my, answers and but it just, it did reveal a lot that I was able to identify of myself and how I am naturally wired. So into going and saying that, what do you want to address as far as that? And like I said, we're going to use my assessment, you all. I am open to using my assessment. So however you want to start by sharing, just your process around that.
So first, I want to share the 5 temperaments. I want to make sure everybody understands what they are. I won't go into a lot of detail, only just for the sake of time, but none of these are not in any particular order. I do want to also say there is no bad temperament, just so you guys know, there is no bad temperament. And I also want to say that this is, yes, how a person is inherently wired. So what that means is it's their natural instinct, how they respond and react to things. Can we work on some of the things that are our weaknesses? Yes, we can. It just takes some work, but let me just tell you what they are. So the first one is choleric. The choleric temperament is your get it done temperament. They are the ones that are probably in their grief style. They are trying to do their best to, organize everything. Let's make sure this gets done. Actually, they're not the organizers. They're more the boss of what's going on. They're like, okay, where's so-and-so? Let's make sure everybody's in the right place. That's the choleric. Then there's the melancholy temperament. They are your get it right people. They're the ones that they want to make sure that how they work through loss, it's being done right. Now, it's not right as in right for real. It's right as in what's right to them, what they feel is right. Then there's the phlegmatic temperament. That is your get along temperament. The get along people is exactly that. They want to get along. They want to know that as we are all working through this loss, all the families coming in or the people are gathering, they want peace. Okay. And they're going to be the ones to say, hey, you know what? So-and-so would have wanted us to be at peace with whatever's going on. So they are your get along peace people. Then there's your sanguine temperament. The sanguine temperament, they're your get recognized people. They're the ones that in their grief, you might see them be very vocal, very demonstrative on how they express and show their grief. Sometimes they are the loud criers, or the people who even, let's just say we're talking about a funeral, they're the people that put a lot of care and attention into even what they're going to wear at the service. And then there's the last one is the supine temperament. The supine temperament is your get included temperament. They're the ones that are waiting to be invited. They want someone to tell them what task is needed. Like, okay, we need you to be responsible for making sure that we have all the food that we need here today. And so they're not going to volunteer. They're waiting to be told. You tell me what I need to do, and they will do it by leaps and bounds, but they need to be invited to do it. And so those are the 5, okay? The choleric, the melancholy, the phlegmatic, the sanguine, and the supine. So I wanted to first start with that. Okay. Now, how this looks is different for each person. So when we talked, Menina, about yours specifically, you were, there's three areas. It's how a person is socially, how they are and how they make decisions, and how they are with their affection. For you, you were phlegmatic in your social. And remember, the phlegmatic is the get along person. And in your control area or your doing area, the area which you make decisions, you were melancholy compulsive. Okay. And so people will be like, well, what does the compulsive part mean? That part is the part where you can barely help it. There are certain aspects of a person when they're compulsive in certain areas where it is hard for them not to be a specific way. That's what it means.
Yeah.
And in your affection area, you were supine, which is, again, the person who is a servant-hearted person who needs to be invited. So what that looks like for you as it relates to grief, again, these temperaments, this is for any emotion, but we're specifically talking about grief, which is really a ball of emotions, right?
Yeah.
So for you, the phlegmatic part of yourself is you want everybody to get along. You want, let's just all come together. Let's not have any trouble as we discuss and talk about what needs to be done. There's also that melancholy compulsive side of you, and that part of yourself wants things to be done right as well. It's going to matter to you, the fine details of the process. Those things matter. And the thing about melancholies is, and this is a temperament strength and a temperament weakness about the melancholy. They tend to think a lot, and they also tend to replay things in their mind. So they see things in living color in their minds. And so the melancholies, they tend to grieve the longest. It's because that part of themselves that is constantly thinking, that part of themselves will constantly bring up all of those details. Let's just say it's a job loss. Let's just put it in a different context of loss. Let's just say it's a job loss. The melancholy is going to remember how the conversation took place when the boss was saying that they were going to be laid off. They're going to remember what it was like to have to pack up their desk, or who talked to them on their way out the door. And so what's going to happen is, as they're trying to get over the fact that, and mind you, get over is not really the way we want to talk to people, but as they're trying to walk through this process, they're going to at times replay those interactions. And as they're replaying it, it will, in fact, trigger some grief responses, maybe tears, maybe hesitation in choosing where they're going to work next. Maybe, no, I'm not going to go hang out at the happy hour with the group that I used to hang out with because it reminds me of the job. So the grief style attaches itself basically to the type of temperament that you have. You're the type of person that wants it to be peaceful, but also to be correct. And you also want to serve. You want to know that in the process of walking out a loss that you're helping people, which I think what we're seeing as we look at the From Grief to Purpose podcast is you serving. So it makes perfect sense to me that you would have a platform like this that would be set up to help other people walk through the many losses that we all see throughout the course of our life. It's inherent in you to try to make sure that you serve others. And so that's pretty much in a nutshell what grief or loss would look like for you based on your inherent wiring.
So going back a little bit with what you said to, like, it's not bad that you are inherently like this, and actually can be a good thing, but you do want to pay attention when it's crossing that border, I would say, to getting unhealthy
Right.
Like, what would be a good example with either one of these? And you could use me for an
Mhm.
example, or all of them, with the phlegmatic or the melancholy compulsive supine, where
Mhm.
I may cross into an unhealthy place, and in terms of
Okay.
grieving
Yeah.
something like losing someone, or something like job
Mhm.
loss. Like the last podcast I did was about job loss. Where would I
Okay.
be if I was in an unhealthy space?
So let's speak to the phlegmatic part first. The phlegmatic is the person who wants to get along. So
Mhm.
that person, where it can look unhealthy is when it starts to look flippant. Like, basically, if other people are wanting to have a serious conversation, but the phlegmatic, because we don't want to get too deep, we don't want to take so much time on this, they can get to a point where they look like they don't care. They're being flippant, like, oh, it's not a big deal, we're going to keep it moving. That's when it can look unhealthy, because at that point they won't be taking into consideration the other people that are also involved in the process of walking out the loss. So that's where it can go with the phlegmatic. Or it could also go because the phlegmatic has a lower energy level than other temperaments in certain things. So they can get to a place where they start to become the observer and they pull themselves out of all of it.
Mhm.
That's not always good either, because what happens is a person can get stuck there. They can
Mhm.
get so comfortable, avoiding, that
Mhm.
they get stuck in avoidance. So that's phlegmatic. The melancholy, it can get unhealthy for them with the constant thinking, if they're constantly replaying that loss and all of the details. And so what I try to tell them is it's important to try to balance out that negative with positive things. So,
Mhm.
and it takes effort. For every time that you're thinking about the details of the loss that were sad, you want to try to challenge yourself to think about some of the positive things. Like, man, that was a really great song that so and so sang at the ceremony. Or, I'm pretty sure that whoever it was that we lost would be proud of how we all came together. So it's about trying to balance the negative thought process with things that are also positive. And for the supine part of a person who's, a supine in their grief, they want to balance not doing too much. Because
Mhm.
they are the servant, what happens is they'll tend to do. They're always doing, and
Mhm.
they're going to need to stop at some point and rest and be able to truly take in what's happening. So it can look unhealthy when they are um, overworking themselves as it relates to grief, because then it looks like, okay, you're making yourself busy to the point where you're not really getting a chance to actually feel the emotions,
Mhm.
and work through them in that way.
Mhm. Now, and I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned all that because I've shared before on the podcast, for excuse me, I was going to say before those who have been tuning in. But I shared before, and I'm not sure if I mentioned to you as well before we did our assessment. But so my mother passed away from breast cancer when I was 16. And of course, my father, I know I mentioned my father passed away in 2020, but when I was 16, I didn't have as much education. I didn't have the language to understand and process her death in a healthy way. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, I, took the, how we were saying, you pick up how you mourn or
Yeah.
how you grieve from your parents. And
Right.
so I believe I was modeling a bit about, a bit from my father. Like, I never saw
Mm-hmm.
him cry. Like the man with the stone, but I never saw him cry. I never saw him grieve my mother's death. We did not go to counseling. It was
Mm-hmm.
more so, just kind of, get the family together. And of course, he was dealing with his own personal grief and transitioning that too. And then having small children. And, there are certain things that parents don't show in front of their kids
Right.
anyhow. But maybe unconsciously, I was picking up, okay, well, this is how we're
Mm-hmm.
supposed to process
Right.
this. But I said that to say this is because understanding, the portion of your temperament, your character, and your personality, and identifying through what this assessment brings is important, now, because had I had the, wherewithal of all of this back then, it would have been the transition. It would have been a very much healthier transition. I'm saying that because I know a lot of times people, that don't know how to grieve or don't understand their grief, don't understand the mourning, don't place honor to it or care to it, can find themselves in some very scary spaces, like depression and, suicidal ideation and, anxiety, there's a difference, of course, between anxiousness and anxiety, but I mean, really just allowing all the emotions that grief come with, and then some just kind of, allow them to overcome, and they don't know how to get out of it. So this is a very, very, very helpful tool that you bring to your approach.
Well, you said something too that I think could be very helpful. You talked about how your dad seemed like a stone, right? And how if you had had the information back then, I want to, for any parents that are listening, because what I've seen, unfortunately, is by the time an adult comes to me because they're struggling with loss, they may have children and they are not thinking about the ramifications to their children of what their process is looking like. And that's not to make anyone feel bad. It's just natural. We're in a fog, So this is a thought process. If your dad knew your wiring then, all right, especially that melancholy the melancholy compulsive part of who you were. If he knew that then he would know that if you weren't talking to him about, the details, that you were probably veering towards an unhealthy place. He would have known that you're going to be the one that he's going to have to kind of come to and occasionally have conversations with. How are you feeling? What are you thinking? What's on your mind? But we as parents won't know that just naturally. We know our children, we do, but we know what we see of them on the surface. And a lot of times parents feel like we know them deep down to their core because we made them. But the truth of the matter is there's wiring that's in there that we didn't place there. So if we as parents get an opportunity to know the temperament of our child, it would help, especially in a situation where there is grief and loss. And just for the sake of people knowing who are listening, we start temperament analysis with people as young as 7 years old, as long as they are strong readers. That will give them the opportunity to be able to read and understand the questions and comprehend them so that they can answer it instinctively, and we can really truly know how they're wired. So it is possible to know how to best serve your children in the midst of a loss with the temperament tool.
That's a beautiful part that you said too. And I have to say, the only way I can say it is, as far as is that, God gives you, your children, and how you steward over whom God gave you is that piece for me. And this assessment in, adding this assessment, or even just any little principle, like, when it comes to your kids, get them counseling, take them to therapy to understand who they are, because you didn't create the parent didn't create the wiring of the child. So, this is, it just adds to it. The tool adds to, just that proper care and, management of, what you've been gifted in your children. So moving on to my next question. With somebody that is grieving or going through a personal experience now, whether it's, like I said, it can be the loss of someone, something, or and even job transition losses are very difficult. Is there, I know that there's no set time, but what language would you put to someone that is fixated on, this time that they should have to heal? And what if it takes about 50 years to, to heal? And then I guess more so too, also to ask this question, a two-part question. I'm not gonna make it complicated, but how people, so I want to say, I think I experienced this myself and I'm going to relate it to the loss of someone, Someone could pass away, and matter of fact, let me just equate it to the loss of my mother. I think when she passed away, I just, and I didn't grieve, and I didn't realize that I didn't grieve. But is it possible for someone not to grieve someone for like years, like 5-10 years, and all of a sudden grief hits you and you're like,
yes.
Like, what is this? Like, how would you, transition or tell someone like it's okay? Like, there's no time to it.
Well, losing someone in the context of losing a person, that's a traumatic event. That's trauma. And so there are times where our survival instinct will protect us and we'll move through that loss in the space that it's happening. And later down the road, and later could be any time frame. It could be a month, it could be a year, it could be 10 years later, something happens that, well, two things can happen. One, the person is no longer in survival mode. They're now firmly planted and feeling safe in their environment. That's one thing. Then the next thing is that something could happen, a song, a smell, a phrase that someone says that can remind them of the person that they lost. And that could, in fact, trigger the grief process that they didn't experience during their survival mode. And when I talk about survival mode, sometimes when a person is in survival mode, their mind and their body will protect them to a place where they don't actually experience fully the emotions and the things that can happen in the midst of that trauma. And there are a lot of people that I've worked with who, so I'm gonna speak on a very, I guess, can be a touchy topic for a lot of people, but I think it's important to really delve into. Yeah. I've worked with people who have lost babies and children at different stages, right? But I've also worked with people who have had abortions, and they are told that they don't have a right to grieve. So they made a choice at some point in their life, and time goes on. And as they are doing other significant things in their life, they start to grieve the decision that they made years prior. And people give them this thought process of, you're not allowed to grieve because you chose to do X, Y, Z. When in fact, they still can grieve too. It's still a loss, no matter what the circumstances were, that was attached to it, is still a loss. And so a person can go through years of feeling okay, and something changes in their life that would then bring up this thought process of the loss that they maybe didn't get a chance to process out. That's a hard topic sometimes for people to connect grief to, but it's a whole world of grief all on its own that, man, I would say that probably needs its own conversation. But yes, that's grief can come later. And I do want to say too, I often tell people there is no time frame.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a difference though, when a person is in a complex stage of grief that they are stuck in, versus a person still having that achy sadness and pain when they think back on someone that they lost, years prior. There is no time frame. We do want to be able to acknowledge that there are times when a person is stuck. And maybe that's why people will say, are you still thinking about that? Shouldn't you be over it by now? They're using the wrong language because they're not understanding that this person may be stuck. And so there's some work that might need to be done to help them move through the process. But it doesn't mean that they'll ever stop mourning or feeling that deep pain or sadness that's connected to that loss.
How would you tell someone that's being pressured to grieve a certain way after understanding what we've learned today about different grief styles, and someone's pressuring them to know you should be grieving this way and that way, get over it, all the terms that we use inappropriately. But for that person to give themselves grace and have the boldness to say, like, what would be some something that they can say, because sometimes people just don't know what to say, and they just kind of come to like, well, maybe I should be over it by now, like, to get out of their own head. What would you suggest?
Well, I think it's important for the person to, and this is the part that's really hard, because we don't like to face this really hard truth. The hard truth is that grief is an unfair process for many reasons. One of the unfair parts of grief is that we wear the responsibility of basically telling people how to help and serve and treat us. And it feels unfair because, like, why do I have to tell you how to do this when I'm the one that's hurting? But the truth is, we're all individual and unique, and we experience grief differently. And so Menina might have one way that she thinks about grief that's separate to the way Shaniqua thinks about it. So it is my responsibility to say, hey, you know what? I hear what you're saying, but I need you to understand that we are different. The way that I think, the way that I process things are different than maybe the way you do. Doesn't mean that you're wrong or I'm wrong. It just means we're different. Yeah. So it would be the grieving person's responsibility to defend yourself, yes, but you don't have to give them a lesson. What you can just simply say is, hey, we're different. There is no right or wrong. The way that you might go about this might be that way, but the way I go about it is different, and that's okay.
Yes. And simple put is that. I love that, because I want people to that are going through something difficult, and you're trying to process your emotions during this particular season in your life, that it's okay to speak up for yourself. Like, there's nothing wrong with you saying, I'm different, you're different. I respect what you're saying. Or I understand what you're saying, but that's not how I process. So that you don't take somebody else's way to process. Because I feel like, and I've done this before, especially in my younger years, where something, especially a family member that may have had a certain influence, over me, had said something to me. I was like, well, maybe I should be, doing it like this. But that's not how I should have been doing it. I should have been doing it, just in my own way. So, but it's okay to, speak up for yourself, and process your journey out.
You're going to be your biggest. You're going to be your biggest advocate, truly, because it's like this. I tell people, let's just say that I'm with my sibling, and we both lost the same parent. Okay, we both lost our dad. All right. Just because we lost the same person doesn't mean our grief process or time is going to look the same, because each of our connections to dad is individual. My bond and relationship with dad looks like this. Your bond and relationship with dad looks like that. And because the bond and relationship is different, the grieving will look different, even though you're both grieving the same person. And that's what's so important about being able to advocate for yourself, is it's okay to say, hey, the way I do it is this way. And it's okay for it to look different, because although we might have some sort of similar connection, and what I mean by that is sometimes a person will be like, oh, you lost your husband, so did I. And I was over it in 2 years, and I'm now remarried. Okay, that's you. And just because both of them are widows doesn't mean that their way of grieving and processing is the same. And so you have to be able to advocate for yourself and be okay with the fact that that person may not understand. And the truth is, they can't understand because they're not in your body, and they don't have the same way of processing as only you can.
Yeah. And I want to just add to this piece, as we're on the advocate piece here, because it just came to my thought process. Just so I want to add that, just being sensitive to this nature here, even women and men who have been raped, or sexually assaulted. I was a sexual assault advocate, and a victim advocate, and a sexual assault response coordinator for 2.5 years for the military. And I found that, like, even those victims have a very hard time transitioning that process because it's a piece of you that you lost. But there's not a lot of language, that they're able to put to it. But even in the advocacy piece of yourself, that's even important language to have, have that. Is it the same type of, do you think, response that you would have to give to someone that has been through a very violent act in this regard of how do they guard their grieving process? Because you did, someone took something from you. So that's like a sense of a loss too. Like, how do you, and I know I'm going off a little bit, but how would you guide someone through their process as far as like being very delicate with their process?
So that there's so many layers to that particular question and to a violent act in itself and how a person is going to respond in the trauma of it. Or first, there's something called ACEs that, guys, anyone listening, take some time and Google ACEs, but there is what it's called is adverse childhood experiences. Based on what their ACEs look like, that's also going to play a part in at whatever point in time that this violation has happened. And then the two things combined will also equal what the trauma or the way that trauma response looks. So it is very unique to the individual for so many layered reasons. There could be one person that was sexually assaulted where, this a thing like that has never happened at all in their life, and they'll react one way. Whereas there's another person who might be sexually assaulted and in their history, there's been some molestation or something like that at some point in their life. And the way their trauma is going to look is going to be, the trauma response is going to look differently. I think overall, what I could say is, the big message I'm trying to get across is no matter what has happened, whether it is a violent act, a loss, a transition of some kind that you weren't expecting to have, no matter what it looks like, it's going to be unique to the individual. It's not going to have a cookie cutter look. And that's the reason why grief is so intricate and complex. It's because we can study it all day long. We can give it names and stages and processes, but we won't know what it's going to look like on Menina until Menina goes through it.
Yeah.
We won't know what it's going to look like on Shaniqua until Shaniqua goes through it. It is that unique and particular to a person. Now, are there stages? There absolutely are stages. But the thing about stages is they don't always follow the same pattern either. A person can skip over one thing and they're doing this right now, and then they'll fall back on the other thing. So it is absolutely unique and different. And I can't say it enough. I would just, for the person or the people listening to this, be okay with the fact that it may not look like everybody else's, but that doesn't mean that it's wrong. And for the people who are supporting people who are grieving, they might seem or appear like this is harder than it should be in your eyes, but understand that it's unique to them. So it's impossible for you to know for sure that how they're grieving is wrong. That leave that part to the professionals, because the professionals will then be able to help a person identify whether they're in a complex grief place where they're stuck. So don't take on the responsibility of the professionals for those who are supporting those who are hurting. Just be present. Don't try to identify or signal out things or put words out there or timelines in it. Just be present.
And going into that part where you're saying, as we're telling people that are in support of, or you know someone that just went through something. And the reason why I added that piece there too about sexual assault, and I'm glad you mentioned molestation, is because there's tiers to what falls or can fall under, you know, a grieving situation, someone that's grieving something or some an event, a significant event that just happened to them. Highlight the word them because it's important to understand like who I am. How do I process what just happened to me, you know?
Right.
But in the support going to other individuals, and this leads me to, I got two more questions for you.
Sure.
For individuals who might not outwardly express their own personal grief, how would you, as you mentioned towards the end of what you were saying, how would you suggest their family members that are watching this now, their community, their friends, their loved ones, you know, someone that's just been impacted or maybe have been impacted for years and they are just in this way or stuck, you know, in this way, the part that you said, leave it to professionals, what would you suggest outside of recommending someone telling their friend, hey, you might want to go to a therapist or see a coach? What would you suggest? How should they handle themselves around someone that's grieving the loss or going through a very difficult time?
Okay. So first, I want to say that for the supporting role people, that's what I like to call them, the supporting role, the supporting cast, you've got to know and be very mindful and careful that you're protecting yourself first, okay? Because the truth of the matter is grieving people sometimes can hurt those around them without intending to do so. That is just a reality, okay? So you want to already just guard yourself well, all right? So that whatever their response is, if you do make a suggestion that they go to a grief support group or go to counseling, if it's received in a way where they maybe lash out at you, be guarded first. We can't just walk into it just willy-nilly, if you will. You have to be prepared that we don't know what the person's going to say. What I would suggest doing to the supporting role, supporting cast, is to do some of your own research. Get some books, you know, go online. Now, be mindful. You want to make sure whatever information or resource you're using is credible research, but do some work that allows you to understand and get a full or a bigger picture of the different ways that people grieve. Because if you do that and you are able to see, okay, this person is withdrawn or they're not talking or they're not getting out, then you'll have a better way of approaching. You'll actually know better how you can speak to them. So instead of being like, well, you've just dropped off the face of the earth, which is, unfortunately, we hear stuff like that. Instead of saying that, say, you know, I just want to let you know that I'm concerned for you. We miss your presence, but we also understand why you haven't been present. Is there anything that we can do to help you feel comfortable to come out? Is there anything that we can do to make the environment safe for you to feel like you can come out and join us more? So supporting role, supporting cast, do your research, do some work. And in fact, there are very few, I have to admit it, very few, but they're out there. There are support groups for the support people, okay? So try to find groups and connections that help to support you as the person that's trying to help the person that is hurting. Because if we're being really honest, Menina, one grieving person, there's like a domino effect. In fact, let's not even say domino effect. Let's just say I'm the person that's grieving. My grief radiates into other people as well. So those supporting people are hurting and grieving the loss of the person they once knew, because I'm no longer the same, you know? And so they should, in fact, do the research and also maybe look into some support groups for themselves. Those groups will help you know the right way to handle your hurting person. Okay. Those books will do the same. And guess what? If the person that you suggested go to counseling won't go, maybe you do a consultation or a couple sessions yourself. Talk to the professional and say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing. It's really bothering me that I can't get so-and-so out of their shell. Or that I am go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just sorry.
Okay. Or that, they're always crying and I feel like I don't know what to say that's going to stop them from crying. Or I might say something that seems to be the thing that always makes them cry. Mm-hmm. Talk to someone. It's not just the person that's grieving that needs help. Mm-hmm. It's the supporting role people and the supporting cast. They need help too. Because again, like we said earlier in the conversation, there's so many classes for so many things: finance, maintenance, technology, but grief, mm-hmm. It's unless you're going to school and you want to have a focus in that particular area, where else are you going to learn? Mm-hmm. So do some of that research to help yourself as you try to help your person.
So this is a caveat question too. This does not count for my last question, so don't count this one. Right. So because what you just said just kind of sparked another question. Mm-hmm. As far as let's go spiritual for just a moment here. Someone that is a believer, like I'm a believer, in Christ, and if how important is it for the supporting cast to not approach the person that just went through a significant loss, or they've gone through something very impactful, to spiritualize the whole approach to the person like they're not a human being? Because I find that sometimes people can do that and they forget that although I'm a believer, I'm still a human. What is the approach that you would suggest?
Well, first, for any believer that's listening, please hear me, okay? Grief is all throughout the Bible. Mm-hmm. There are so many instances where there is grieving going on, okay? And not only just grieving on the outside, if you will, but depression from grief, tears and crying from grief, not wanting to go on from grief. That's in the Bible. Read the word. It's all in there, okay? What I would say about people giving overly spiritual responses to someone that's hurting is you want to be careful, because grieving people are very vulnerable, and it's such an interesting and unique filter that they now have on their mind during this fog, that certain things catch and certain things don't. And when you say something like God had a reason, or God had a plan, or there's a purpose for this, God has a purpose for this, what you just did unintentionally is you just made God public enemy number one. Because God has a purpose, God has a plan. We don't know what those plans are because we're not God. So when we bring him up in the midst of someone's deep pain and anguish, all you did is put a target on him. Now, God is a great God. He can handle any emotion, any anger, any fear that we have towards him. But that actually can harm a person's relationship that they have with the Lord, because now you're right. He has a reason. What reason could he have possibly had for taking this baby? What reason could he have possibly had for doing XYZ? So that's where the mind goes sometimes when you put God into a space where a person is not ready to receive him. If you want to talk to a person about God's purpose and God's plan, that's going to come way later. Mm-hmm. That's going to come really when the grieving person decides that they want to start asking that question and trying to figure that out. It should not be the go-to statement that we make. Mm-hmm. And another thing for all of the people who are listening, who are believers, yes, prayer is an amazing thing. It is a tool that we should all be using. It is a connection to our Heavenly Father. Yes, all of that. Mm-hmm. But prayer and pain, prayer and grief, prayer and loss, prayer and tears, those things can still be happening in a person be praying. Mm-hmm. Don't say, well, you're not praying hard enough, or pray and the Lord will take away this pain. And don't do that to them. Mm-hmm. Prayer is communication. It is an opportunity to go before the Lord about the thing that's concerning our heart or concerning our mind. And it is an opportunity for us to allow him to hear what's, mind you, he already knows it, but to allow him to hear what's going on in our minds and to try to tell a person that, you're still crying or you're still feeling this way, or you need to be praying more, you need to be giving that to God more. This is the thought process. When you're walking through grief, just sitting up in the bed is a process. Just standing up and making one step forward is a process. And that's what prayer is going to look like to a grieving person. Mm-hmm. They'll pray right now. We can pray in this very moment, but that doesn't mean that I don't still ache, that I don't still cry. Mm-hmm. Don't assume that a person who is struggling with a loss is not still going to God about their pain.
Yeah.
I will give you a personal little anecdote. When I lost my baby, this is an interesting thing. People were like, we're praying for you, or we just know God is going to, all the things. They were saying all the things. And I got mad. And I was like, I don't want to hear you say God one more time, and you dare not pray for me. I'm just being completely frank. That's how I was. Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't want to hear you pray. Don't talk to me about prayer. Mm-hmm. But at night, when everybody else is sleeping, but I couldn't because I was still so hurt, so lost, I would pray myself.
Yeah.
My prayer didn't look like maybe what others were, but I was like, Lord, I don't know what you're doing. I don't know why this is happening, but I would pray in the way that worked for me. Mm-hmm. So we can't assume that just because a person is still, we see the outward signs of their grief, that means that they are not going to God. Let them do that on their own. Don't push him down people's throats. Do not make him public enemy number one. Allow them to get to him when they need to, because he's very much present anyway. They'll lean on him when they're ready.
Yeah. I just thought that was so important. And thank you for sharing your own personal story too, Pastor Shaniqua, because I think it's important just to emphasize, like, you're still human, mm-hmm. You just experience something. So don't like overshadow it with something, right. Else. Like, don't fast forward yourself like to a place where you're not there yet. You're not, right. You may not be in the prayer mode right now. You may not be there. So it's important to be sensitive to all of that. I want to share this real quick. I think about Lazarus when, mind you, when Lazarus was sick and they came and they traveled and they told Jesus he's sick, he's going to die. And Jesus waited, before he went to do anything about anything. All right. Mm-hmm. So when he shows up on the scene, Mary and Martha, Mary comes out there. I think it was Mary who came out there and she was raging. You should have been here, she was saying. Mm-hmm. He's gone. You should have been here. Mm-hmm. And so the thought process is this. She's raging. This is her own grief. Her grief was anger at Jesus. Okay. Yeah. And so look, the Bible, it also tells us in that story that he wept. Mm-hmm. Why was he crying? Now, Jesus had the ability, which we got to see, where he said, Lazarus, get up, and he was able to call him out of the grave, but he wept. Mm-hmm. He was grieving because these people were hurting so deeply. Mm-hmm. It hurt him. He mourned the fact that these emotions and things that they were feeling was so sharp and so strong. It hurt him to see that from them. So why is it, guys, that if Jesus can feel mm-hmm. that overwhelming hurt and pain and anguish, that he himself would weep? He didn't even get on Mary. He didn't get mad at her because she came out there saying, you should have been here. He didn't get mad. Yeah. He understood. He understood what she was going through. So if he could understand, why can't we? Mm-hmm. He already knew he can say, rise up, you get up. He already knew he could do that. He knew he had the power to do that, but it still grieved him that they hurt. And so if he could feel that, if he could have empathy, and if he could be patient with them and all of the different emotions that I'm sure were boiling over in the space out there, who are we that we shouldn't give the same level of compassion in the same room for a person to feel the feelings that they have? Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And that's that, if you really want to take on the mindset of Christ, that's a perfect example, and And then I always like suggest to people, like, remember, keep yourself in mind. If you really don't understand, I guess, how to empathize with someone, how would you want someone to empathize with you? If you were to go through something, I'm pretty sure you wouldn't want someone to tell you in relation to this context, like, hurry up and get over it. Like, what are you doing? Like, why are you crying? All those types of things, come from, I believe, your own personal upbringing as far as the supportive role is concerned. How were you raised? What did your parents tell you to do? And are you passing that language on to somebody else? And it's not appropriate. But if you really care about someone, especially your friends or loved ones that's going through something, you will do your research, like Pastor Shaniqua was saying, like, get a book, go to the library, I want to buy a book. There's so many different resources and tools, YouTube, so many
listen to podcasts like these,
Yeah. Yes. So, okay. One more question.
Sure.
And then I will wrap it up here. But my last question for you is going back into grief styles, the beautiful assessment that you allowed for us to hear and you shared. But how can understanding someone's grief style help them build a better relationship with their emotions and their faith during the grieving process? And I would say or their faith, because I do understand that not everybody is a believer in Christ. Not everybody has a faith, period, whatever God you want. And just saying, like, how you as the individual, and I say that piece because also too, when my mother passed when I was 16, I was nowhere near the Lord's at all, period, so that process of transition for me was more human. And then, of course, not doing it, but how can understanding someone's grief style help them build a better relationship through what you shared with us in the tools that we use with the assessment and understanding our temperament, personality, and characteristic of ourselves?
Well, knowing our temperament and inadvertently our grief style through temperament, it would help us to have more grace and compassion for ourselves. The truth of the matter is, when you have all these people saying you should be over it, or you should be, doing this or that, or why are you still foggy at work? You should be able to, still function. Like, all of the expectations that everybody has, it sometimes can permeate and get through to us in ways that are not good. And we start questioning ourselves, like, maybe I should be over it, or maybe I have been doing this too long, or whatever the case may be. So you start to doubt yourself now. And so to know and understand your wiring, your innate, inherent way of processing things, it will help you have a barrier, a guard to your heart that will allow you to not let the things other people are saying or putting on you touch you. So, for example, I a part of my wiring is I am a choleric. Okay, the cholerics, they are the get it done people. Get it done by any means necessary. I mentioned to you a little bit earlier, Menina, that my father is in the hospital. He has been diagnosed with glioblastoma, which is terminal brain cancer. Everybody in my family is processing it in different ways. I'm the person that's like, okay, so we need to make some plans. What are we going to do? We need to do this. We need to do that. I could easily feel like, as other people are side-eyeing me, maybe I'm, doing this wrong. But the truth is, because I know that I'm a get it done person, I know that the Lord wired me that way, and I accept that that is the way he wired me, then I don't feel bad about the fact that I need to be doing things. I don't feel bad about the fact that I need to know what the plan is. And so knowing who you are and how you're wired will help you boldly go. It'll help you know what to do and how to protect yourself from the things other people are saying, and to protect yourself from your own thoughts. Because the truth of the matter is, sometimes the things that come up in our minds can really take us on a spiral, right? So we can then take those thoughts or take the things that are being said, and we can present it with the truth. I always say, you want to take what's being said or what we're feeling or thinking, and we want to present it with the truth. The truth is, I'm a get it done person. So although they're saying to me that I need to like wait and just, just see what happens, the truth is I'm a get it done person. So I can't wait. Now, I do need to be mindful of the fact that not everybody else is get it done. So I can't force them to do, but I am. So for me, I need to be doing something. And that's what is so important. It's going to help you be comfortable knowing that you're okay. And on top of it, too, if you know your wiring and you're starting to see yourself do things or feel things that's not true to who you are, then you'll know you need help. You'll know, this is not me. This is not my norm. This is not how I normally process. Maybe I do need to get in somebody's office. Maybe I do need to join a grief support group. So knowing your temperament, knowing how you're wired, knowing your grief style will help you know if you really are stuck or if you're just walking this thing out the way that you normally do.
And then, what would be, I think we mentioned this before, maybe it was before when we were talking prior to the podcast, like in an ideal world, what would be so beautiful is having this knowledge. Everybody has it. So that way, if I already know that, Pastor Shaniqua is the get it done one, then that's her, and I'm going to let her do her. And I am the one that's like, is everybody okay? Peace, then that's, but we can, we just form this team, for whatever the, thing that is taking place at that moment. And I just feel like you're flowing so smoothly. No one's getting on, anyone's nerves. No one's getting upset. No one's angry because you understand this is how this person is. I don't need to be upset. We can avoid a lot of different, things. Because we all at some point are in, a form of a supportive role, whether it's,
in some way
for ourselves. But like you were saying, it's that, and I also want to add to, I was just thinking how people, if you're in a supportive role and you've said before, or you have found yourself wanting to say someone, get over it. Don't, I want to say like, don't, be dismissive of the fact that that person may even know like what they're, how they are. They may even know themselves. So if they're ignoring you, or if, are not paying attention to the fact that you just said get over it, and now you're angry because they're moving and how they naturally move, it may be because they already know themselves. But
so it may not be that they're having a problem. They may be in a place of acceptance, like, hey, you know what? I actually know I'm doing this the way I need to do it. And so what I think you're telling them, don't get upset that people aren't taking your advice, because they might actually, they hear you, but they're not changing because, hey, I'm actually comfortable in the space that I'm in with how I'm walking this out. I wanted to point out one other thing too. When I was talking about my dad and me wanting to be the person that's like, let's get things done. There are people in my family who are wired as melancholy. Okay. The melancholy temperament weakness, one of them is that they can be prone to negativity. Okay. So they're the ones that might be at the hospital thinking the worst immediately. Like, oh my gosh, he's going to be gone tomorrow. Instead of me being mad that this person is on that negative bend, if you will, I will understand that that is a natural part of where they go when they're starting to feel, discombobulated. Now they're falling to the temperament weakness of negativity. So instead of me yelling at them and being like, stop being negative, think positive, I can understand, okay, this person is really struggling because they've gone to the negative side now. You said a few seconds ago, if we wish that everybody could just know it. I always say, if I had some sort of dust that I could just sprinkle on the world and everybody just knew their temperament, I would so do that, because it doesn't just help us understand grief. It helps us understand why this coworker is always on our nerves. Like, why can't I don't know what it is about her. She's bothering me. The truth is, temperament helps us to understand the why behind everything that we do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Now with your the assessment that you provide with your to your clients, can anyone like sign up for, like if they wanted to take the assessment with you, can they just sign up to take the assessment, or do you require like they have to meet you for certain sessions afterwards, or can they just do the assessment? And if so, how can they do that with you?
Okay, so they can go to creativecounselingnetwork.org. So that's creativecounselingnetwork.org. Under services, there is 2 different ways that they can do it. If it's just an individual, they can sign up for an individual temperament analysis. If it's a couple, they would sign up for the couple temperament analysis, which I highly recommend, by the way, couples. And actually for our dating people, I recommend it for you too, because if you get serious about someone, you need to know, like, how are they wired? What is that going to look like up against me? Okay. So anyway, they are broken up into 3 sessions. The reason they're broken into 3 sessions is we go over the social aspect of who they are in temperament, their decision-making area, and the way that they give and receive affection. So it's, when you first sign up, you're signing up for that first session. And then when we do it, then we schedule the second one, and then we schedule the third. You do not have to, after doing that, you don't have to like have other sessions with me. Temperament is a tool all on its own. If someone is going through something in their life and they want to be able to do sessions with me, I still require temperament to be done first, because it helps us to understand what they're actually going through. So creativecounselingnetwork.org is where they can go, click on services, and they'll be able to select individual temperament analysis or a couple one.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I do also want to let you guys know I do this corporately as well. I do this. People bring me into their corporate settings, and I teach bosses the temperament of their employees so that they can best put them in the best roles that they should be in their job, and so the boss will have a better expectation of what this person is capable of and how to talk to them and encourage the best out of them. I also do this at churches. I go in and teach temperament to their staffs and their team leaders, because how will you properly minister and help and effectively serve people if you don't understand people? So if you are out there listening and you want to know how we can come and do this at your church or your business, please still reach out to us at creativecounselingnetwork.org. We would be happy to assist you.
Yes, it was just so important too, the piece that you mentioned about the job atmosphere, because you know how we just often hire people, often you're hiring based off of a resume, and then the interview, of course, and then but that should be something that should be a part of the interview process, I believe.
Yes,
because for supervisors and people in different positions, like, are you really getting to know that person? Are they really in the right fit? So that's beautiful that you do offer those services to organizations and companies as well. Yes, I love that. I absolutely love that. Now, as we're wrapping, go ahead.
I also wanted to share, just in case there's anyone out there, I mentioned earlier in the episode that I experienced the loss of a child, my sweet baby girl. Her name is Samantha. In turn, I ended up authoring 2 children's books. It's a part of a series. They're called Nursery in the Sky. Yes, Nursery in the Sky, and A Special Delivery from the Nursery in the Sky. These books are meant to help you explain to your children. So when I lost my baby girl, I had a son already, and being able to explain child loss can be really tricky when we're talking to kids. And so this book helps them to understand that. And then Special Delivery from the Nursery in the Sky, that book is specifically to help prepare your living children for another baby after a loss. Because it can be scary, not just for mom and dad, but it could be scary for the kids too, because, okay, well, you were pregnant before and we didn't get the baby. And so now you're pregnant again. And so it helps you prepare. So I did want to mention that you can find those on Amazon.com.
Yes, I was going to do it. I was just going to mention, like, I was like, do you, I wanted to list any others. You know, you're an author, you do so many different things. You're, you know, you counsel, you coach. Do me a favor though, and all this information, by the way, you all is going to be in the message feed where you can go and click on her clickable links to get her books and her reach out to her for the assessment service, coaching, or counseling services that you may need for Pastor Shaniqua. But do me a favor one more time, because I know you kind of flashed it, but show the book again, please, one at a time, so we can get and give us that detail again.
This is Nursery in the Sky.
Yeah.
One of the things that I'm most proud about with this particular book, I'm trying to find it, is that I have at the very end, it's got some common questions that kids will ask their parents as it relates to the type of loss, and how you can answer it in ways that are actually, you know, easy for them to understand. That's one of the things that I'm most proud of this book, Nursery in the Sky. And the second one is Special Delivery from the Nursery in the Sky. This one is about having a baby after a loss. And this one also has some questions that are commonly asked that parents could find some simple and easy ways to be able to help their little ones understand. We are currently working on Nursery Pets, which is a part of the series. We have quite a bit of parents come and talk to us about their child struggling with the loss of a pet. So we're adding Nursery Pets to the series. It's going to be a way to help children work through the loss of their pets.
Yes, because pets are a part of your family, you know, too. You become very attached. I know I have 2 fur babies myself, but you become very attached. You know, and it's beautiful too. Like I said before, and not to any slights on my father like that. He just did what he knew, you know, to do.
Of course.
But if there was something like, you know, your books, you know, to where he had a Nursery in the Sky, that type of information for parents, even when you are the parent of your children and they lost their grandparent. Like, I think that's important too, because sometimes I think we don't think that they understand like what just happened, but they do. You know, they understand a little bit in their way, like something just, you know, why is grandma and grandpa not here anymore? So
you're okay to talk about that. Just for the listeners, it's okay to answer their questions, and do know that they're going to ask you more than once, but you want to answer the question according to their age, and grow the answer as they grow. So the answer will become more detailed and more specific as they get older when they ask. But for when they're small, you know, answer on the level. And if they're 5, try to give it to them in the way that a 5-year-old could understand it. And please, please, please stick to the truth. Sometimes we say things to try to make it, I guess, more palatable for the little ones, a little whimsical, but they don't forget, guys. So you don't want to say, well, so-and-so went to live on the moon. I say that because, trust me, I've heard this in office before. So you want to be honest with them, but just do it in a way that they can understand, that won't scare them or make them confused. Call me if you need it. I'll help you if you need some guidance on how to answer those questions.
Yes, that's important. So you don't want to have to backtrack yourself out of the confusing method that you just gave to your child, you know, because they are, you know, kids are smart. You know, I always believe kids are smart. We understand. I think sometimes as we get older, as adults, we forget that we were once kids and how smart we were. You know, how we used to put 2 and 2 together. Like, okay,
people weren't telling us. We could see. They notice more than we think sometimes.
Exactly. So how and where can we reach you all? Your social media handles, please provide that to us as well. Outside of your, your website, where else can people reach you?
So you can find me on Facebook, Creative Counseling Network. You guys can, if anyone ever needs to call, you can call our office. The number is area code 803-784-8481. You could also email us at info@creativecounselingnetwork.org.
Awesome, and all that will be left as well, you all, in the message. But before I close, Pastor Shaniqua, I'm gonna give just like a little. I always give like a little bit of something. But is there anything that's on your heart that you wanted to, if you had to speak to somebody right now that was going through something significant in their personal life, any type of encouragement you want to bring, whatever you would like to say or would not, because you've said a lot, you've covered a lot, which I truly appreciate once again for you coming on and doing so. But if you would like to say anything else, please do.
I think the biggest thing I want to say is, to the grieving person, be kind to yourself. Okay. To the supporting cast, be kind to yourself also, because there is no handbook on exactly what you should say and do. So it's kindness. Be compassionate and show grace to yourself and to those around you. And if you need help, get help. Don't hesitate. Don't wait. Sometimes we wait too long. So get the support that you need. And one thing I do want to say too, which is going to sound so strange, if you are going to join a grief support group, join one that does not have your family members in it. So if 3 of you are going to go to grief support, 3 of you should probably consider going to 3 different grief support groups. The reason for that is because you want to be in a space where you can say anything that you need to say. And sometimes when you have people in the group that are a part of your family or your friendship circle, you don't get what you need out of it because you're filtering yourself. So get the support, but try to do it in individual ways.
I love that. I'm glad you said family or friendship. Those are separate, yes. I love that. Yeah, separate sessions for sure. You can process and feel free to talk. So that's beautiful. And one thing I will say, and I've had the pleasure just to speak with Pastor Shaniqua just over this time that I was able to meet you, and you accepted my request to be on the podcast. She's such a beautiful light, it's not just words, such a beautiful soul. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing your expertise with people. My mindset, I guess, with the podcast, my mindset with the podcast is myself years ago, like, what would I want to hear? If I was in my situation, or if I had experienced what I've experienced, what can we give to other people? And you truly pour out, not that you have to go through things to be able to, resonate or speak or have a powerful message, but you can tell when someone's been through something and how that, just transcends to someone. So I appreciate you coming on, sharing your own personal little bits about your story, and your, just sharing your knowledge. It has been a blessing to me. I hope that it blesses, and helps and educates someone else, because the language is important to understand who you are, so please, if you can, schedule your appointments. And get yourself on at Creative Counseling Work with Pastor Shaniqua, so you can take your assessment. Because again, it's not just about grieving the loss, she said, but it's also can help. And that's a whole other podcast. We're going to have you come back on with relationships.
Oh boy, that's one of my favorites to delve into as well.
That is a whole nother podcast.
Yes.
And but it just helps us, it will help you break down. It helps me for sure to understand, like, oh, okay, this is why I am the way that I am. And there's nothing wrong, there's nothing wrong with me. This is just how I am, and there's nothing wrong with you. So by all means, get the assessment done. You won't regret it. It'll bless you. It'll bless your life. It'll bless your soul. But I read quotes. I'm always looking. I love quotes. I love a good quote. I used to have this book. It was like the Webster's dictionary of quotes. So every now and then I like to do a little quote, or I'll just like speak from the heart. But a quote that I came across for this particular episode, it says that it says, remember that grief is just love with no place to go. And I want to just kind of counteract that a bit, just in context of this episode. Like, grief has a place to go, after understanding, like, how, and I'll relate to myself, how I process. This is me. This is how I show up. This is my temperament, my character, for my, personality. This is why I am the way that I am, into these subcategories of what we were speaking of, like, being melancholy and so forth. Like, oh, okay, this is where my grief has gone into these places, and how I transition that grief into where it should, properly go. It's up to me, individual. And that being said, like, I could choose to hold it all in, and not allow it to just, be released properly. But I wouldn't have understand that in the depth that I was supposed to have understood that if I had not come across Pastor Shaniqua and her, just level of expertise. So it's so important, you all, to, just be mindful of yourself, be mindful to give yourself grace, as we mentioned in the podcast, to love your own self, be your advocate, your own advocate, as was mentioned in the podcast. And there's no time limit, on grieving or mourning a thing, or going through a very tough transition. How you process that is totally your own, but there is a difference about being stuck, stuck in that place. And I'm sorry, real quickly, because I'm not sure, I think we did touch on it, but can you give an example how someone can just recognize, like, how would I know that I was stuck, and not just like, well, I'm depressed, so but how do I know that I'm stuck?
It can look like avoidance. It can look like, not leaving the house at all at this point, and getting comfortable and secure just being in the house. It could look like replaying over and over and over again a specific part or aspect of the loss, and not being able to move through that process, just being in that one space. It could look like avoiding certain people or circumstances that will remind you of that loss. I'll give you a quick example. When we lost the baby, I got to a place where I could not walk by infant clothes in the Walmart. Okay. And it gotten so bad that, and so just big for me, that it got to a place where I would go out of my way to avoid walking past that area. And so I realized and recognized that I was stuck, because it was preventing me from being able to pick up things that I needed, because I still had a child that was in like pull-ups and things of that nature. So I still had to go to the baby area, but I was avoiding it. I was sending other people to go do it. And so that's when you know that you've gotten to a place that's stuck, is when it's gone beyond a norm. So of course, after losing a baby, it's going to be normal to not want to be in the baby clothes aisle or to go get diapers. It's going to be normal for a while. But it got to a place where months and months and months, I would not go into that aisle. Months and months and months, I would not go into the nursery that I had set up in the house. And so stuck is when you just can't move. And so I eventually got help, got support. And finally, I had to ask people to come in with me to the nursery in our house and help me pack things up. And I had to tell them beforehand, don't, like, there, everybody could use a donation of this or that. I let them know I'm not ready to actually donate anything yet, but I do want to go in and start, taking things down and, changing the room. So it took me going to counseling. It took me being a part of grief support groups to be able to realize that I wasn't moving the way that I needed to. And those people were able to give me the right tools needed to unstick myself, if you will, to start doing the things that are necessary. When I go to a baby aisle now and I see baby girl clothes, I still have a little pang of anguish that shows itself every now and again, but I can go in there now.
Yeah.
And it's been 10 years. I just want to make sure everybody hears that. It's been 10 years and I still have feelings of grief when I walk into a baby girl clothes section, but I can go now is what I'm trying to say. It's not like what it was when I was stuck.
Yeah, and I think that's important. I said, and as we close up, listen, this might be the fifth close, as they say, in church. But that's a real place, and I think it's important to also for professionals, to understand if you're in the field of, therapy, you're a counselor, you're a coach, you're in high professions, and you also need help. I think it's important to say that too. Like I also went to, counseling. I went to counseling therapy. I started a therapist when my father passed away because I knew at that point to do so. And I knew that I didn't grieve properly with my mother. So I was like, nope, not going to do this one by myself, because I knew that portion of me, I knew how I was. Like I had already, like without doing your assessment and really understanding myself, I knew that I wasn't going to do it properly. So it was important for me to go get therapy, but it's so important. Like I mentioned before, one of my friends or mentors that they had mentioned that every coach has a coach, every therapist has a therapist. It doesn't take any credibility away from that person, the individual. It's actually smart and healthy because you're not a superhuman being. You're not a super, hero. Yes, we're all people. Yes.
The same experiences as everybody else does. In fact, on Monday, I meet with my therapist because with all the stuff going on with my dad, there's a lot that needs to be processed. And so take care for any of the professionals out there listening, please, please, please take care of yourself because it actually helps you care for your people even better.
Yes, please take care of yourself. That is so important. Therapy is a real thing, a good thing. Even, like coaching. And I always say there's a difference, you guys, between coaching and therapy. I always like to give an example. Coaches help people move forward in different ways. Therapy is more of like a very in-depth breakdown, clinical things and things like that. Coaches not diagnosed. I don't want people to get confused. But the stigma, I think, is coming off of therapy as we're in 2024, which is a good thing. But it's very important. So, but do you have anything else? And I promise you, I'm closing this time for real.
All right. No, I think that I've said most of what I wanted to, but I do want to say thank you for doing this. The podcast From Grief to Purpose, that's important. So many people need it. So I just appreciate and value that you're pouring so much of yourself into making sure other people get what they need. So thank you for what you do.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And so this will be the first episode, just to, one of the first episodes that will air on as we go forward. But again, thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. So as I close out you all, this was the From Grief to Purpose podcast. This podcast is brought to you by way of thatdoseofencouragement.com, where I offer grief coaching and empowerment coaching services. And again, please reach out to Pastor Shaniqua. She is, again, just you have to sit with her and get that assessment done and be in her presence. And she's just such a light. When I tell you the assessment blessed me, because I'm one that I like to know about myself and understand and define and all that kind of stuff. So it just helps you move forward in a healthy way. But please reach out to her as well. Again, I'm going to drop everything in the message feed for everyone to be able to click on. This was our show. We hope that you all enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, we will see you all on the next episode. Bye. Or I will. I don't know. Look, Pastor Shaniqua's not going to be here, but I'll see you. Okay. We'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
But really quickly, Pastor Shaniqua, please share with us the support hotline that you all offer during the holidays.
Yes, so normally we offer a grief support hotline on Thanksgiving and Christmas. This year just be on Christmas at 10 a.m. and at 7 p.m. It'll be an hour each time. The purpose behind it is grief support is actually hard to find on an actual holiday. And we know that the holidays can be very tough for a lot of people who are working through a loss. And so we like to provide a service on that day. It's free for anyone. If it's a person who is grieving or a person supporting someone who is grieving, feel free to drop in. We're going to have a Zoom link posted on our website, creativecounselingnetwork.org, and on our Facebook page, and other social media platforms. We'll have the Zoom link. We'll have the flyer out so that you can share it. It'll be out in about a week or so, that information. It literally would be an opportunity for people to just drop in for encouragement or prayer or whatever they may need prior to being with their family and friends, or if they're coming to the 7 o'clock one, for after. Maybe they need some encouragement after they braved being out with people during one of the hardest seasons that they might be experiencing. So we look forward to it. We partner with a lot of different coaches and counselors and organizations to make it happen. So anyone who's listening, feel free to come out and join us.
Awesome. Be sure to come out, you all, if you need that support during the holidays, because the holidays can be a very tough season. All right.